Today, we're going to take a look at the current seedings for the NFL playoffs and take a look at the teams still fighting to get in and make our predictions as to which 14 teams are going to be in the playoffs. And some of these scenarios are wild. Like, take the Saints, for example, and it's going to take a lot for them to get in. The Ravens, it's going to take a miracle. The Vikings, how can they get in this? So it's in here. Oh, they can't. Grossi Packer Nation. Welcome to another episode of Packcast, the podcast where you don't have to be Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom. Packers are the number one seed at Grossi, and today we're going to be, I already talked about what we're going to be doing in the intro, so we're going to go through each conference. We're going to look at the NFC, we're going to look at the AFC, we're going to look at the current seedings, we're going to look at some potential scenarios as to how the seedings could shake up. We'll do that for both conferences. And of course, we'll take a look at some of the most important games that had playoff implications in Week 18. So starting off with the NFC, a little bit less complicated when it comes to the amount of teams that could actually sneak into the playoffs, as 6 out of the 7 spots have already been clinched. The Packers, Rams, Buccaneers, Cowboys, Cardinals, and Eagles have all clinched, meaning that the only 2 teams that are still eligible for playoff spots are the 49ers and the Saints. In addition, 3 out of the 4 divisions have already been clinched. The only one that has not is the NFC West, which is still up for grabs next week between the Rams and the Cardinals. And even better, the number 2 seed can actually still be clinched by 4 different teams. So currently taking a look, the Packers have clinched the number 1 seed. They have clinched the bye and home field advantage throughout the playoffs. Taking a look at where we're at right now, the Rams are sitting at number 2. The Rams can win the West and the number 2 seed with a win over the 49ers next week. Now, this makes things a bit interesting because the 49ers, they have the Rams number. The 49ers beat them earlier this year on primetime. And the 49ers are still fighting for a playoff spot. So the 49ers have a ton to play for. Meanwhile, the Rams, they've won 5 straight. However, their past few games haven't looked so great. Matthew Stafford throwing a bunch of interceptions and has not been consistent, to say the least. So nothing is for certain there. Number 3, you have the Buccaneers. They clinched the South. They still can clinch the 2nd seed as well. They're going to need the Rams to lose. The Cowboys, after losing yesterday to the Cardinals, dropped down to the 4 seed. They have already clinched the East. They too can clinch the number 2 seed as well, but they need the teams in front of them to lose. Then you have the Cardinals at the 5 spot, who, believe it or not, can actually still get in at the number 2 seed, though they're going to need some teams to lose. They can also still clinch the West. They need to win their game against the Seahawks next week, and they need the 49ers to beat the Rams, and then they would be NFC West champions, and they would go up to either the 2 through the 4 seed. Then sitting at the number 6 seed right now, but has not clinched a playoff spot, is the San Francisco 49ers. They have the tiebreaker over the Eagles, so if the 49ers win next week, they are in, and they will be getting in at the 6th seed and above the Eagles, but we'll talk about that in a moment. And right now, this is definitely clinched. You're welcome, Eagles fans. Because the Packers won last night over the Vikings, the Eagles have clinched the number 7 seed, so they are guaranteed a playoff spot. So they're going to be playing this Saturday, but for them, it really doesn't matter. And the only other team in the hunt for the NFC, as we talked about, is the New Orleans Saints. Now, here's what's interesting. It's going to come down between the San Francisco 49ers and the New Orleans Saints. The Saints, they have a game against the Falcons. The way that they can get in is pretty easy. They have to beat the Falcons, and the 49ers have to lose to the Rams. And as we just talked about, the Rams are on a 5-game win streak. So even though the Saints offense has been poopy caca basically this entire season, since they haven't had a quarterback and they have all these injuries, their defense is still really good. They beat the Panthers yesterday. Alvin Kamara got a little bit more involved. So it's very possible that the Saints sneak their way into the playoffs. Meanwhile, the 49ers, they lost to the Titans a couple weeks ago. They were able to beat the Houston Texans, even though in the beginning of that game, the 49ers really didn't look good. And so just taking a look at these matchups, the Saints should be able to beat the Atlanta Falcons, even though their offense is anemic. The Saints defense should be able to hold Matt Ryan in check. So I believe the Saints are going to win over the Falcons. So it's really going to come down to, can the 49ers beat the Rams with their playoff hopes on the line? I think they can, but if I was a gambling man, I actually think the Rams might take this one. The Rams have a home game. The 49ers, yes, they do have the Rams number, but the last time that these two teams played, the Rams didn't really have a running game. Sony Michel has emerged these past couple of weeks as a really great running back. On top of that, we'll see where Cam Akers is at. But their defense has also stepped up. You look at their game against the Ravens, OBJ and Von Miller really stepped up, two key pieces that they got during the season. Von Miller delivering the game-winning sack. So I'm actually going to pick the Rams to beat the 49ers. And if the Saints are able to beat the Falcons, the Saints would actually sneak into the playoffs. The 49ers would be out. And unfortunately for 49ers fans, I can see that as a really big possibility. Then heading over to the disaster that is the AFC, in which you have 5 teams who have clinched playoff spots, but the seeding is still wide open. It's just pandemonium. Number 1, you have the Tennessee Titans. Who would have thunk it after Derrick Henry going down with injury? All the injuries that they've had, some really bad losses. They are back at the number 1 seed after demolishing the Dolphins and the Chiefs losing to the Kitty Goes Meow Bengals. So they're sitting at number 1. They can clinch the number 1 seed with a win over the Texans. You might remember, though, the Texans were able to knock off the Titans earlier this season, so it isn't a gimme. Number 2, you have the Chiefs. They can clinch the 1 seed with a win over the Broncos, and of course, the Titans losing to the Texans. So the Chiefs are most likely going to be hanging out in the 2 seed because they should be able to take care of the Broncos. Number 3, you have the Cincinnati Bengals. They just clinched their division with a win over the Chiefs this past week. On top of that, they actually still can get the number 1 seed, though it's very convoluted how they can get there. It is still possible for them, which would just be incredible. The Bills, they are still trying to win their division, and on top of that, they could go up to the number 2 seed. They cannot win the 1 seed, but the 2 is still obtainable. They can clinch the East with a win over the Jets, or if the Patriots lose to the Dolphins. They can still get the number 2 seed with a win over the Jets, the Chiefs losing, and the Bengals losing as well. Then number 5, you have the Patriots, who ironically enough, can still clinch the number 1 seed, so they could actually catapult and still get a bye here. But they need to beat the Dolphins, and they need the Bills to lose for them to even clinch their division. So there's a lot that needs to go on for the Patriots to really be able to catapult up there. And then from there on out, everything is fair game. Right now, you have the 6th seed as the Colts, but they have not clinched a playoff berth. Theirs is really easy. They clinch if they win over the Jaguars. So the Colts should be able to do that. They did lose to the Raiders this past week, but you like to think that the Raiders are a bit better than the Jaguars. However, anything can still happen. It is the NFL this season. Number 7, you have the LA Chargers, and theirs is pretty easy as well. They win and they're in. Going up against the Raiders on Sunday Night Football. The Raiders sitting at the 8th seed right now, and it's the same thing with them. Whoever wins that game between the Raiders and Chargers is going to go into the playoffs. However, there was this fun little tweet that came out today, and I thought that this was just hysterical. If the Jaguars are able to pull an upset over the Colts, and the Chargers and the Raiders tie, both of those teams would go into the playoffs, and the Colts would actually miss the playoffs. So that would kind of be funny. It'd make for a terrible game, but the lulls would be there. In addition, the only other 2 teams that could potentially get into the playoffs, but it's a long shot for both of them, are the Steelers and the Ravens. The Ravens, they need to win over the Steelers, plus they need the Colts to lose, they need the Chargers to lose, they need the Dolphins to lose, and they need a Browns loss either tonight and or next week. So there's a lot of things that have to go right for the Ravens and able to them to sneak in. And meanwhile, for the Steelers, still going to Super Bowl, they need to win out their next 2 games, and the Colts need to lose to the Jaguars. So there's a couple of different things that could happen here. I mean, there's just so many crazy scenarios. If the Chargers and Raiders tie and the Colts lose, both of those teams go in. If the Colts lose, you could have the Steelers. If they win out, they can make it into the playoffs. And let's be honest here, I don't think the Steelers or the Ravens are going to make the playoffs because I just don't think the Colts are going to lose to the Jaguars. So I think the Colts are going to get the number 6 seed. And then it comes down to 2 wildly inconsistent teams on Sunday Night Football. You have the Chargers and you have the Raiders. Both have had really bad losses, have been up and down all season. There's times when they look really good, and then there's times when they fall flat on their face looking at you Chargers, like losing to the Texans. So this game is honestly probably the hardest to predict for this upcoming week. I'm going to give the slight edge to the Chargers just because they have a bit of a more explosive offense. And so if their defense is able to kind of catch up with that, Eckler, if he's able to have a good game, I think they'll be able to get the job done. However, as we saw, at a bunch of times for the Raiders, whether it was last week or whether it was week 1 and going into overtime. Daniel Carlson has 4 game-winning field goals. So the Raiders can get it done in crunch time. However, I think the favorite in this game will be the Chargers. I'd pick them to win. So because of that, the Chargers would be able to sneak into the playoffs as the number 7 seed. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Whoever winds up sneaking into the playoffs in those last 3 spots, it is going to be an absolutely insane postseason in the NFL, considering how crazy this season has been. I'm all about it. But let me know. You can always find me at TomGrossiComedy.com or TomGrossiComedy, all social media, see down below. Check out Patcast on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play Music, Spotify, and of course YouTube. And a big shout and thank you to all the patrons over at patreon.com/TomGrossiComedy and the YouTube members. But thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. And as always, go Pack, go.